podcast. Today, I'm excited to welcome Meg Conover. She's a physician associate. She's been working as a PA for 15 years, and she's currently working in internal medicine at a psych hospital. So welcome, Meg.
Thank you. I'm so excited we finally got to do this.
I know. I'm ready. I'm excited. I can't wait to learn more about what you do and also talk about your social media stuff because that's really exciting. You're growing. I feel like I've seen some growth lately.
Yeah, social media has been blowing up. We're pushing 10,000 on Instagram, so that's pretty cool.
It's important stuff. You're not just putting out silly videos like me. You're putting out important things.
Mostly important, but the silly videos, they get some views too, so that's good.
Yeah, good. Today's episode and all episodes on this podcast are not medical advice and do not reflect the views of our employers. I just want to give everybody an insight into what you do as a physician associate, as a PA. For those of you who are new to the podcast, this is what we do here. We talk about careers in healthcare to help you find out if you want to go into healthcare or if you're already in the process, maybe what field you might want to go into. Maybe you're between doctor or PA. You're not sure if you want to go to med school or PA school. So we're here to help you kind of decide that. So yeah, let's get into it. My first question is always, why healthcare? Like, why did you decide to do medicine? Was there one specific thing or situation that led you into healthcare?
Sure. Yeah, it's a good question. I feel like I ask myself the same thing every day. Why healthcare? Why to do this? But my parents would probably tell you as young as like 7 years old, I was watching like the Discovery Channel, like knee arthroscopies they would put on TV. There was some fascination with like seeing inside the body at a young age. So, I considered doing PT, like physical therapy stuff, athletic training. I was an athlete. But eventually, I was always planned to go to med school and wanted to be a doctor. And I was doing some PT tech work after I finished my undergrad, and the doctor advised me, whatever you do, don't become a doctor. Don't go to med school. And it was an orthopedic surgeon, of course. So I was like, okay, what else do I do? What else can I do? There was a PA that worked in the clinic. I was like, let me just gather everything up. I have about 2 days to take the GRE. So let's just wing it and see if the grades make it in for my application. And they made it by like a day, and I ended up getting accepted. And so I went to PA school. So.
Wow. So kind of a last minute decision.
Yeah, I always wanted to be in healthcare in some way. I always thought I wanted to be in surgery in some way, but other factors started to play in as you get older. I wanted a family, which, you can have as a female surgeon, but I didn't see it at that time. I didn't want to be in school for another 10 years. I wasn't a huge fan of classroom stuff. So I really wanted to become clinical as fast as possible. And that seemed like the best way.
I agree.
Yeah.
Because I took a similar path. But yeah, same. I was on the course to become a doctor always, I thought. And then once I heard about what a PA was, it was definitely very intriguing. And I'm so glad I took this route. But I like what you said. It's not impossible to have a family as a female surgeon or a female doctor. And for anyone wanting to go to med school, go for it. But it's interesting. You're the second or third person on this podcast who said that a doctor told them not to be a doctor.
It's funny. I had that MCAT book. I was studying after work, and that's how they found out that what my plan was. And he's like, oh, no. And I thought about going back as well. I thought about going to med school. Yeah, a couple times, but it doesn't fit now. And it definitely doesn't fit financially for us now. But,
right.
I could have gone either way. I think the thing I'm most grateful for that I didn't go is where I started as a PA was trauma, hand and plastic surgery. That was my passion. That was my master's focus. And now I'm internal medicine in psych, and I would have never gotten there. And I feel like I would have been burnt out of surgery as a doctor so fast because I burnt out as a PA quick, and I love surgery, but lifestyle is hard.
I feel you on that right now. It's really about versatility, right? Like I think a lot of us become PAs because of the versatility, because that you don't really know what you're going to feel like in 5 or 10 years or what's going to happen. And it's cool to have this career where you can just pivot on the spot, like so quickly. And it sounds like you made a big pivot. So we'll get into that a little bit.
Yeah.
Did you go straight from undergrad then? You got your applications in time? You went straight from undergrad to PA school?
No. I did a 4-year undergrad degree at University of Delaware. I played Division I soccer. I had a blast. It was great. And I ended up with a lot of stress fractures in my feet from training. And I was like, there's more to life than sports. I got to figure out what that is, and let's travel. So I did study abroad in Australia for half a year, a couple semesters. And I was like, I want to stay. So I lengthened it. So I did a full year in Australia. I could have graduated early, but I'm like, well,
Awesome.
let's just take organic chem, keep my visa, and let's stay there, and then let's see what happens. So I was in Australia for my last year of undergrad. My student visa expired when I graduated, and I had to come back and like kind of figure out what to do. I started doing PT tech work. I did that for a year, and then I started like, kind of applying in the process, and
Okay,
that's the
got it.
gap.
Right. You said you were doing work. I wasn't sure if that was while you were in school or you already out. So that's cool. I'm jealous. I really, really wish I could have studied abroad. It's so cool that you got to do that, and I'm all for taking a year off after you graduate as well. But if you could study abroad, that's a plus. After Australia, after you took a year off and you were working you said in a PT clinic,
Hmm.
you then applied to PA school. So were your hours at the PT clinic counted towards your patient care
Yeah,
experience?
that's why I did it. I had to have like 2,000 hours. So that was why I did that. That's why I had that delay too, but it counted. Again, it was med school. That was my plan when I started PT Tech. And you needed, some experience was good for that application too. So, I was kind of deciding getting back to life, not in Australia when I was, applying to PA school. So yeah, it worked. I think some of the applications like Stanford required like 2,400 or something. So I didn't have enough, and I didn't want to work another year. So
It's crazy, some of these programs they're requiring so much. I worked in the training room in college, so kind of also PT type work, and that also counted. For anyone listening who's trying to get patient care hours, like PT clinics, that's another good way to do it.
it's so fun. And I made so many friends there. And it's really good to learn how to talk to patients in that setting. You're getting a lot of patient
Yeah.
contact. So
Okay, so then how many schools did you apply to?
6, I'll remember that. Um, so I was in Arizona. I'm from Connecticut originally. When I came back from Australia, my family had moved. So at home was Arizona, and I didn't even know how to get to the grocery store. So it's a big
Oh my
change.
god.
I was like,
Yeah.
I'm not sure I'm going to stay in Arizona. I like San Francisco, LA, New York. So I applied to like PACE and a few in like Bay Area and in LA, and then of course the one in Arizona, just in case. And that was the one I decided on, surprisingly. So I ended up staying at Midwestern University in Glendale, Arizona.
Nice. And did you like that program?
Yeah, yeah, it prepared us for the boards so well. And but I just don't love school. I'm not a person who likes to sit in a
Me either.
classroom. That's why I wanted to be a PA. That's why I wanted to go clinical. So to be fair, I skipped a lot of classes and I taught myself at home. And but the classes you had to be at, like I went to. Board preparation was fantastic. Clinicals are kind of tough to get the clinicals you want, as with all PA programs, but I ended up with some really good clinical rotations ultimately. And it was great. Yeah, I felt that they super prepared me for everything and no problem with the boards. So,
I love that you're being so honest because I can't stand school either. I mean, okay, I should say I loved school for so long. Like I
yeah.
was like the person who loved high school and like I was all gung ho about everything in college, and then like senior year of college rolled around and I was already burnt out.
Hmm.
So then going into PA school, for anyone who knows, it's rough. It's
Yeah.
just my program was 2 years. I don't know how long yours
Yeah.
was.
2 years and like 3 months. So,
Yeah, and it's all the way through. You have like almost no breaks, and it's a lot. So yeah, I didn't love being in the classroom. I also did the same thing. I didn't go to all the classes, and I will say I know that a lot of programs that is not an option. Like attendance is mandatory, but it wasn't at the time, and I think it was actually a good thing because I think it allowed us to like want really want to be there. You know what I mean? It wasn't like you're being forced to. They weren't treating us like we were little kids, like you had to sign in every day. It was like you're adults. If you want to learn the material, show up. If not, don't. But like we will make sure you pass your boards. And they have a really high board passing rate.
yeah, well, and everyone has different learning styles, okay? I didn't absorb everything. When someone's talking about it, it's on a board, it's in a dark room. I get tired. So I would do some of that, and I would read my books and I'd make flashcards and I'd write it and I'd review. Like I had to learn each thing like 3 times. I had to study hard. And not being in class gave me extra time to study. So it wasn't like I was just playing or doing not doing school. Like it's work. It's a lot of work. And some people learn differently. So I think, whatever works for you in order to pass. I mean, people failed out, that's for sure. So I didn't want to let that happen.
You did what you knew was best for you. I did the same thing. I feel like we're very similar in this way. I have to like teach myself multiple times. I can't
Yeah.
just sit there and listen. You'll get like 5 minutes of my pure attention, and then I'm like somewhere else in my mind.
Yeah, 100%. And if you want even more honesty, I considered dropping out the first year, probably like four
Really?
times. Not because of grades, but just because it wasn't my thing. I wanted to be clinical. All my friends at that time were professionals. I had friends that were on yachts. They were yachties in Europe. Like they were just living the life, and everyone, was making good money. And I'm just sitting here broke in my apartment studying at 4 in the morning. And that's hard when you're young. And you just have to wait, and that, hopefully ultimately you're going to be that professional too. But it's hard because it feels like you're behind, I guess. So ultimately, of course, I didn't drop out, but I considered it so many times, and I think that's like totally normal.
Are you happy you didn't drop
Oh
out?
yes, oh yes. I can't imagine what I would have done otherwise. I mean, I still love medicine. I love patients. I love healthcare. There's a lot of struggles, and it's like a love-hate relationship daily. It's a battle in my mind all the time, and at this point, I've been through so much, probably burnt out 3 or 4 times from different positions, but like always find myself back in the medicine, in the patients, aside from everything else that goes on otherwise, administration or insurance or whatever.
Yeah. In the end, it's really about the patient, and I think we can get lost in a lot of that administration stuff and a lot of the drama, and then you have this interaction with a patient that just like makes you feel so good, and you're like, oh, yeah, this is why I'm doing this, you
Right.
know?
It's not like a job you go and you leave. It's a job that you carry a little bit of each person you interact with every day with you. And different specialties allow different amounts of that. But, anytime you're in peds, of course, those kids, they're vulnerable. So anything you can do to help a kid or a parent that's stressed, that's huge. And that stays with you. And now being in psych, I mean, I'm seeing patients who are attempting suicide and they're not sure they want to live, or postpartum depression. And like you'll carry some of those with you. Those are moms. They have kids my age and they're struggling. And if you can just give them your time, your divided attention, and your non-bias, like that's so valuable sometimes. So that's where that you feel good. It's a good gig. I'm not just sitting at a desk. You feel like you're doing something that matters to somebody. Maybe it's just one person.
Right. Totally true. Your first job, I think you mentioned it maybe already, but what was your first job out of PA school?
It was awesome. It was hand and plastic trauma surgery with like the coolest surgeons ever, the busiest hospitals. We were over 30 hospitals in the Phoenix Valley area. They were
Oh,
like the
wow.
only hand surgeons on call, which imagine as a new grad, like, oh, this is awesome. We're going to see some really great cases. But, you learn that that's going to mean like 100 hours of work a week. You're on call at
Hmm.
4 given hospitals every single night. You're on
That's
call,
nuts.
and high burnout rates for PAs. I think I started with one of my classmates, or she came on shortly after I did from our graduating class. And there were 4 of us. And then like a month later, there were 2 of us. And then, there was one for a time. And it's just that turnover. But the job was amazing. It was surgical, it was hospital based, and we had a clinic that we saw like 300 patients before 2 p.m. every day between 4 providers. It was wild.
That is
Like so
wild.
wild. The best fractures, gunshot wounds, free flaps, even kids, peds. We did the first surgeries in the Phoenix Children's Hospital when it first opened. Some really, really good cases, but can't maintain that for I did a year. I did a year of that, and I was like, I'm not healthy anymore. I'm not sleeping. I'm up at 4 a.m. to do brachial artery repairs. I've gained weight. My dog hates me, and I want
Oh,
something a little bit more than this. So it
yeah.
was wonderful. But after a year of 100 hours, and it just kept decreasing, like there was no PAs. You were just constantly running. I'd go to 4 hospitals a day, typically.
Oh my God.
So after a year, I was like, we need a change. And I went to urgent care where it was more
Okay.
predictable.
All right. Yeah, that's cool. I mean, I'm sure you got to see so much and got so much experience in that one year, though. I mean, you probably did more surgeries in that year than most surgical specialties do. I mean, it sounds insane. Like, I can't even imagine, how do you even get 300 patients in an office? Like,
Well, thank goodness I wasn't in charge of that, but I was in charge of like the surgery schedule and calling all the hospitals and getting the patients on. So no, I don't know. I don't know how they did it. I don't know how those doctors have continued, but I love them. And I've still been in contact with one of them, and he's been a reference for me. And he's amazing, Dr. Champagne in Phoenix, Arizona. So one of the questions in your email said, what do you recommend? So most people are going to tell a PA, don't go into a specialty, don't specialize early on. But my recommendation would be like, do hospital stuff, do surgery, do rounding, so you know what it's like, and then do
Yeah.
clinical stuff, or vice versa, whatever it is. So you have both that experience of being in a hospital setting and in a clinic. And so that was super valuable. But I went to urgent care, and they were super happy to have someone who did hand surgery because they get a lot of hand injuries, a lot of finger lacerations and dislocations. So that's valuable in that setting too. But I got this more diverse sort of knowledge, and I did that for like 3.5 years, and it was a 12-hour shift. I did some nights. I would do 3 or 4 days a week. I'd bunch them all together, do 9 shifts in a row, and travel abroad for
Cool.
a couple of weeks every month for like an entire year. And that was great. It gave me that
Yeah.
relief from the burnout that I had from surgery the year before.
Totally. How long did you end up doing that for?
By 3.5 years. Um,
Nice.
yeah, and I did pick up another gig while I was doing that, and kind of do. I did some acute rehab, like internal medicine stuff, the last year. So I was working like 1.5 times, like one full job plus a part-time job, which was great. And I learned some internal medicine. It was like kind of my first exposure at like hospital medicine, really complicated trach patients, heart failure patients. So I did that for a
Wow.
stint, and then it kind of cut back.
Really quick, what you said about don't specialize. A lot of people gave me that same advice too. Like, go do emergency medicine before you specialize in ortho. But like, I just really knew I loved ortho. And so I ignored everybody and I went into ortho. And it was a cool job because, like you said, I got the hospital experience and the surgery experience. And then I went private. So now I have the clinical experience and the hospital experience. But I would say if you know there's something you love, like just do that, because then you might end up taking a job in the emergency department, which you might feel is fine, but it's not something you love to do. And then you're just going to go through like however long in this job that you don't really love. And I don't know, I'm more about like being happy and doing what you're passionate about, and because that comes through to your patients. So
100%.
anyway, I agree with you on
Life is a
that.
long time, and to imagine that anyone, even a doctor, wants to do one specialty for their entire life is wild. And I think that's why we see a lot of burnout. Because we can switch is why I'm not burnt out at this moment. So yeah, I agree with you. Follow your passion, know that it might change, and know that
Hmm.
sometimes lifestyle might trump passion too, and just be open to it.
Right.
And I think what you want to do will change as you go through your career. And being a PA, we can change with it. So that's good.
Yeah. It's so cool. It's the best career.
Yeah.
So then 3 years at urgent care. What was your next move?
Oh, you're gonna laugh. Hand surgery.
You went back.
Yeah, no, different setting. This was outpatient, minimally invasive. We had our own surgery center. This was in North Scottsdale, Arizona. We were doing stem cell treatments. Everything was in house. We didn't have any hospital privileges, even no expectations, no rounding. So we were a clinic, and then surgeon had his surgery center downstairs from the clinic, and he had like two ORs, and we kind of ran that together. I was his first PA, which a caution anybody taken that position. But he was very open to it. And I guess you're going to find either someone's going to use you as if you are capable in that job, or they're going to hold you back a lot because they don't know how to use a PA. And I've seen both sides of it. But thankfully, he trained me. We did every single thing together for like 6 months, surgeries, closing patients, and then he kind of set me free, and it was awesome. And I got to run that clinic for a while. We had a fluoro, so I was doing all the diagnoses myself. I was doing ultrasound guided injections in the clinic, some stem cell injections in the clinic, and I would schedule the patients for surgery, and he'd meet them down in pre-op, and he'd review cases, and we'd talk all day long because I was upstairs, he was downstairs, and it just worked really well for a long time. And then one day it didn't. But
How many years were you there?
3.5 years.
Oh, okay, that's a good amount of time. It's
Yeah.
good to have a boss that gives you a lot of autonomy, I think, if
Hmm.
you want
If you're
it.
ready for it,
If
if you
you're
can
ready
handle
for it.
it. Otherwise it could be really scary. But I had a lot of experience with hands and hand surgery, and he taught me a lot when I first came in. So I was
Right.
ready to be set free and
Yeah.
not kind of be his sort of personal assistant. So
Yeah.
it was great. It was great. A lot of autonomy. We got a lot of patients in. We did a lot of cool stuff. I mean, we were doing stem cell stuff, fat tissue transfers, and I would do all the harvesting before he even got to the OR. And it was a lot of fun. And we did some really cool stuff, like cutting edge stuff.
Cool.
So it was good for a while.
Yeah. I like the hands-on stuff. I know I'm kind of putting you on spot here, but do you have like one super crazy story that you want to tell people about? Because I
So
don't
many
know, I'm
crazy stories.
so many crazy stories. I
So
feel like
many
the
crazy
hand is
stories.
like so far into me. So give me a crazy story.
One patient that stuck with me forever from my first job in trauma. It was like a 6-month-old who came to us at the Children's Hospital, and she came from Mexico because Arizona's close to Mexico, and she had been run over by a bus, and her arm had been run over by a bus, sort of at the brachial area here, and it was circumferential, and parents had just been sitting on it in Mexico. They didn't have good health care. So finally, I don't know how it happened, but they ended up with us, and she was losing that arm entirely, and she was only 6 months old. So we were able to do nerve repair, artery repairs, artery replacements, and she ended up keeping the arm and losing a couple fingers, totally
Wow.
saving her arm. The surgeon I worked with on that case is one of the most incredible surgeons I've ever known, still have ever known. He does a lot of peds and congenital peds now, like an amazing human being. That one sticks with you forever. Just wild, kind of. And then, such a young little kiddo.
I know. That's so insane. I can't even imagine how like everything in the brachial plexus surgeries that I was in, everything is so tiny, like repairing the
Oh my
nerves. And I
God.
can't imagine then taking that and doing it in a child. Like,
Well, let me go back even further. So this was like, I mean, this was 2011. This was a long time ago. And I vividly remember the surgery. And we're in the surgery. And when you connect the arteries and you're like, okay, let the tourniquet down. And you're like,
mm-hmm.
please work. Well, of
Yeah.
course, baby blood sprayed all up inside of our gowns and stuff. And
Oh
normally you'd be
no.
a little worried about that when it's a patient, but
Yeah.
this was a baby. So it was just like, thank God, like the
Yeah.
blood's flowing, you put a couple more stitches in, and we see how it goes from there. But yeah, I remember that so vividly. And that was a good case. That was a decent result. I mean, she lost some fingers, but tie it back to like what I'm doing now, educating parents about burns, circumferential wounds, the emergency stuff. Like that's one of the cases that I think about all the time. The parents needed to be informed, and you can have a better result. But
Oh,
there's so many crazy cases.
I wonder how she's doing now. Surgery is just so cool. And I know if you're listening and you're not like into surgery, I get it. But when you can take something that's like totally broken and fix it, it's just such a awesome feeling. And it's great when patients like they are so thankful for it, which is so gratifying.
Mm-hmm.
That's a crazy story. That was your third job in like the private clinic. And then where'd you go after that? Is that where you are? Does that bring us to now?
Nope. So I got pregnant while I was working
Nice.
there, and they were building a second clinic, and they told me, hey, you're going to be the lead on this. You're going to open this clinic, because I was doing all clinic at that time. I wasn't surgical anymore. And I had hired on another NP. I interviewed her, hired her, trained her up and everything. So I was moving up sort of in this management thing. So I thought.
Cool.
And I was like 33 weeks pregnant, and they called me in for a meeting with the CEO and the surgeon. It was just one. And they're like, we can't afford to pay you anymore. Game over. Like, pack your stuff, go home. That's it. Done.
Is that legal?
Probably not.
Oh my God.
Yeah, stuff was going bad at that time for them financially. We knew that. Believe me, I contacted some attorneys and the
Mm-hmm.
Department of Labor and everything else. And it's really hard to prove those things. And they ended up
Yeah.
hiring a surgeon, a doctor himself, like who was amazing, graduated from one of the most, renowned hand surgery institutes and residencies. And they ended up letting him go a couple weeks later. He had only been there for
Wow.
like 3 months, and he had a
Oh, so they were
contract.
in a bad way. Yeah.
Bad way, ended up letting the NP go too. So there was going to be no way to prove that this was related to me being pregnant. They hired the NP back shortly thereafter.
Okay.
The surgeon ended up suing them. Things went all haywire, and
Wow.
that surgeon is not practicing medicine anymore. So we can leave it at that. But
Whoa.
that has
I
nothing to
got
do
the
with me.
drama.
I kind of went quietly into the night at that point. I didn't want to fight. I was pregnant after two miscarriages. I was pregnant with valley fever, where I had been very, very sick in the early part of pregnancy. It was a very high risk pregnancy. I was on fluconazole for like 9 months, and I did not want any bad energy. I was like distraught initially, but I took the time and said, okay, this happening for a reason, right? I'm going to focus on myself and my child, and I'm going to enjoy the rest of this. And then, had the baby, and my little guy, he was born in January of 2020, and we all know that was COVID.
Oh, wow.
So, so everything in the world shut down, and when he was 3 months old, and I was still home with him, and my life changed like completely from that moment. In hindsight, a really really good and needed way, which I'm really grateful for now. Things happen in strange ways, but that was how that job unfortunately ended. And that's kind of healthcare in a nutshell. I mean, I know a lot of PAs whose hospitals have been sold or closed, or practices have been sold, and this is part of the game. We have no control over our financial freedom, our income, our job stability. You could be doing the best job in the world, and somebody else is running the show, and you have zero control over it. And
Yeah.
that's the love hate part of this whole thing.
Yeah.
I mean, you have no job security ever in healthcare, ever. You start making more money, you stay longer on the team, you become more senior, you're more on the
Mm-hmm.
chopping block, which is
Mm-hmm.
sad. And I wish it wasn't
It's
that
sad.
way,
Yeah.
but that's the truth. And, anyone considering going into healthcare, it's the truth. And you have to always have something in your back pocket or a game plan. I did for a lot of my career too, but not when I was pregnant, because I doubted that anything would happen to me while I was pregnant. So,
Right. Well, yes. Okay. So I've seen it. I've seen it happen where the top, executives and people who have been at the hospital the longest are the first ones to get let go, which is just like so hard for me to wrap my head around it. I don't think it makes sense, but I understand why they do it, I guess. So yeah, we don't have job security in that way, but also we have the security of knowing that like at least now in the foreseeable future, PAs are always going to be necessary and doctors are always going to be necessary and nurses are always going to be necessary. So it's easier than, let's say somebody, for instance, I have a friend who lost, her company got sold, and she decided to leave her job, and then took her a year and a half to find a new job. Like, I'm not sure that's going to happen in healthcare. So I guess that's the good thing to fall back on. But yeah, you should always have kind of like a little bit of a backup plan.
yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right. You can turn around and get another job within days, usually, depending upon what you're willing to take, as far as, schedule benefits, whatever. But having another plan is important, I think, in healthcare. It just is what it is. I'm laid off, I had a baby, and it's COVID.
Yeah, things do happen for a reason. I mean, you were probably, I don't know how you felt, but like I may have been happy that I didn't have to worry about a very stressful job while COVID was going on and I had a newborn. So maybe it was for the best.
Yeah, it was toxic. It was very toxic at the end. It was very stressful. I would take breaks, drive my car down the street and cry. And I didn't know why I stayed there. I was trying to help. It was just, I thought I could help more, but obviously it didn't matter. And then I decided, it's my first kid. I don't want to go back to work. This is a pandemic. I don't want to bring home these germs. And that was like a really hard decision, because I have skills, and I felt like I should have been helping in the pandemic. And I felt so torn, but I had this little baby that was so hard for me to have, ultimately, anyways. And I was like, what do I do? Like, what's most important? The health of my newborn, me helping the greater community through a pandemic. And it was hard. And I didn't have the choice made for me. I always thought I'd be pregnant, I'd take 6 weeks off, and I'd go right back to work because I love my career. But it changed, and I got forced into a different mindset. And I interviewed, during that time. I interviewed pediatric trauma, actually, at a local hospital. I sat down with a top surgeon, and he looked at my resume and he said to me, "This looks like you have no idea what you want to do. Looks like you're confused." Yeah,
What?
I'll never forget that. Yeah, I did a lot of specialties. I had a lot of different positions. And, I kind of walked away from that. And I think they called me back for another interview after that. But my head was spinning at that time. And I'll never forget that, though, that he said that. And as a PA, you can decide if you want to be super duper specialized and spend your whole career in one thing, or you can have a vast amount of knowledge that you can use in your specialty and add to that practice, whereas maybe the doctors and surgeons don't have that knowledge. So
Right.
I did get offered some ortho trauma positions during the pandemic and ended up turning them down. We decided to move from Arizona to Idaho. That was like kind of top priority. We did that. The house sold. It was craziness. We had nowhere to live. We decided we're going to buy a house sight unseen in a town we'd never been in, and we did that.
Wow.
My husband's job was remote, so we could, just like a lot of
Uh-huh.
people. And we moved to Idaho, and my kiddo was like 10 months, and I ended up getting pregnant like the weekend we moved in. So
Wow.
so it was like, well, we're going to wait a little bit longer to go back to work and get settled. But I did want to go back because I had been staying at home for a long time, and I love my kids, but I wasn't built to be a stay-at-home mom. It just wasn't my thing. I have other passions, and I felt pulled back to medicine. I actually interviewed for a hospitalist position here, and I was actually 12 weeks pregnant, and I kind of had to hide it. But
Mm.
I did, and ended up getting that job, and the credentialing took like 8 months, which was wonderful for me.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, we're ready for you to start now. And I'm like, my due date is in like 4 days.
Yeah.
So they were amazing. And I took 4 months off, and then I started an entirely new job, specialty, state, hospital. The whole thing was new. And I learned a ton. That was where I started in hospitalist medicine. And that was like a huge learning curve, having two little ones at home too. Two under two. So
Wow. I bet.
yeah, yeah.
So what made you want to go into hospitalist medicine or internal medicine, which is what you're doing now in a psych hospital?
hmm I wanted to keep learning. Like with hand
Yeah.
surgery, I feel like I had tapped out. I knew everything about all the joints in the hands, all the nerves in the hands. I wasn't interested in going surgery with the little kids at home and not having a predictable schedule. So I just wanted to learn. And I've always said, like, we should have a sabbatical where we can try out like every specialty we want for like a couple years as a PA.
Yeah.
Because I think we'd be really a lot better as a PA, as
Right.
PAs in general, if we could do that. So I kind of made my own sabbatical, but it was time to learn something new and complicated and challenging. And so hospital medicine is that for sure. The patients are more complicated than I've ever seen in my life. It was a huge challenge. And I was working part time, and I was working 10 a.m. till 10 p.m., which didn't end up working out so well for my little family and my little kiddos. So ultimately, I switched off of that again, and still doing hospital medicine. I don't even remember how I found this job in a psych hospital. I was just applying because I wanted to be able to put my kids to bed at night and see them
Yeah.
for dinner. Like that was the
Hmm.
priority. And so I found a job at a psych hospital, and I do the hospital medicine, and I manage the complex patients. And there's like, our census is like 105 patients at any given time, and I'm the only medical provider there on site ever. I have
What?
one partner; she's a PA too, so we switch off. And
That's
there's
crazy.
about it's an inpatient psych, so we have an ICU unit, which is like psychotics, prisoners, people who are like high psychosis, methamphetamine psychosis. They need to be protected. And then we have an adolescent unit, which is kids who have similar issues. We have a detox unit, we have an adult unit, and we have a geriatric unit. So it's a ton of fun, actually.
That's awesome.
It's daytime, and I get to go see my patients. I do their histories and their physicals, and I manage their meds, and I see anyone else who got sick overnight, which you wouldn't believe the complexity of what I see. I mean, cirrhosis, GI obstruction, like a bowel obstruction,
Yeah.
decompensated heart failure, pancreatitis. That's my day now, which is
Wow.
great. I just have to be able to recognize it and keep the patients safe and get them to the right places. And that's what I do now. And I go home when the work's done. Yeah.
I don't really know anybody that works in psych, which is so interesting. I loved my psych rotation though. I will say, like, I got a really good rotation. I've been curious about it. You do the internal medicine side of things, which also scares the crap out of me because at this point I'm like 12 years into my career and I've never left ortho and I'm just like, what is congestive heart failure? No, but
It's
like,
hard. It's complicated.
yeah, and I sometimes think like I wonder if I'll ever go back into something else where I can just like relearn all of this stuff. So I commend you for that. Like it takes for lack of a better word, it takes balls to be able to like just jump into another specialty like that. Like I honestly, I don't know if I could do it.
Yeah. I don't know what I was doing, honestly. I mean, I heard that statement more than once too. And um, you got to be totally committed. And I just don't think I, having other things going on at home, little kids, it's hard to learn that stuff. And doing it in the actual hospital setting and not the psych setting, you need to know so much more. So the psych setting suits me now, where I'm continuing to learn, but I'm not actively managing. I'm having to recognize and diagnose, and then send them off to a higher level of care for management, which is okay with me for right now. It's
Yeah,
fine.
that sounds great. I mean, it sounds like a really cool job.
Yeah, and I've always enjoyed the like diagnostic part of things more, like the mystery and figuring out what's causing it, and then the management. The management can be more tedious sometimes. So
So I guess this is a good segue into the question I ask everyone, which is, what do you love about your job and what do you hate about your job? Or in your case, you've had a lot of experience. So what do you love about being PA, and what do you not love about it?
I love that PAs can switch specialties. I wouldn't be a PA anymore if I couldn't do that. So I've switched specialties so many times, and I have this like wealth of knowledge in all these different types of specialties, and I love that I was able to get that being a PA. So number one, that's the most amazing part of our job. What do I hate about it? Oh, there's a lot of things to hate about it too.
I'm all about being honest as you want to be. Like, I'm not trying to just sugarcoat things on this podcast.
You have no control over your job stability, job security, financial future. You have no control. And likely you don't get raises frequently. Like, I mean, I had to negotiate my pay, and I negotiate as high as possible starting, because you don't get raises. And if you get raises, you end up on the chopping block too. So it's hard. I don't think being a PA is going to make you rich by any means. You're going to work your tail off, and it's not a pathway to being rich. That's for sure, if that's what you want to be. And admin has the ultimate control over you, no matter how good you are. So that's one thing that's not good. And the other thing in healthcare in general, and I'm going to describe this because I was feeling this yesterday when I was at work, even though I love my job, and I love my patients and I love my admin now, healthcare as a whole has gone in a certain direction where, if you're not in healthcare, you got to imagine like the busiest day you've ever had in your life. You had meeting after meeting after meeting. You couldn't eat lunch. You couldn't pee. You couldn't take phone calls. You couldn't do anything. And you were totally overwhelmed and over scheduled. But you got through that day, and you did it with flying colors, and everything went well. And then you went back to work the next day, and they said, hey, this is your new normal because you can handle it. And that's like what healthcare is.
Yeah.
Let me just see what you can handle. Let me overload you until you crack.
Yeah.
And if you don't crack, I'm going to do it every day. And that stinks. And it's not their fault. It's insurance fault. I mean, we can't make money to keep these hospitals open to help these patients. And it's a greater problem. We all know this. But as a PA or anyone working in healthcare, you're going to be part of the cog in the wheel. And ooh, it's hard. It's hard sometimes.
It is. It is. It's almost like sometimes I just can't think about all of that because it makes me so mad. But you just have to, I guess, not play the game, but like just know what the game is, and still keep your integrity during it. When you start working, you're so excited, and then you start realizing like what actually is happening behind the scenes, and you're like, wow, I have no choice. I have to do this. I have to code this way because I'm not the boss. And do I, it's a lot. So I agree with you on that. It's a great answer for what you don't like about it, because it's what healthcare is. It's a business, unfortunately, and shouldn't be, but it is. But it's also amazing.
Well, and at the end of the day, you got to separate the me from the whole part of it, because they're
Yeah.
not doing it to you.
Yeah.
They're not doing it at you. And then you go see those patients that they overloaded your schedule with, and you realize they needed help and they needed you, or somebody, anybody. So there is a greater good, and every shift will ultimately end, and every day will ultimately end, and we'll all be okay, hopefully. But I've felt that so many times in this career. So
Well, I love your answers. And I also agree, obviously, with the versatility thing. I think it's number one reason why people go to PA school. Real quick, before we wrap up, I do want to talk about your social media agenda, because I love watching your videos. They're so informative. I don't have kids yet, but just froze my eggs. So,
yay!
yeah. So hopefully someday. But I learned so much from your videos, and not just like how, I'm in healthcare. I should know how to treat a problem, but I have no idea when it comes to children, right? So like, what
Right.
is your agenda? Why did you start this? And what's your favorite part about being on social media?
Yeah. So you probably know, well, ever since like becoming a healthcare provider, a PA, you get calls from friends and family, and they want answers to like, hey, what's going on with this or that, or what's this rash, or what do I do with my kid, and all these things. So I answered those questions for years and years and years. Like I'll get pictures, multiple phone calls, and I love it. It's great. I can help people. But you'd be surprised what you think is common knowledge to you is not common knowledge to everybody else. And there was a point too, now working in psych, where I'm seeing a lot of patients who have other problems. They have emergencies, they have traumas, and they have kids. So they cannot function themselves, nor are they going to be able to help their kids. So I see that the kids are suffering as a part of these families because I'm talking to their parents. And then I'm also talking to the children, when they come to me in the adolescent unit. And to be able to provide some kind of information from a source that these people watch all day, every day, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, I'm on all of them, is like such a privilege that I know this information. I can put it in a way that they can understand it and they can see it in passing, so that when their kid gets burned by the ramen that falls off the stove, they know what to do and the kid doesn't suffer. And that's the goal. The number one goal is that these little kids who are so innocent and so sweet and so wonderful, and once you become a mom, you feel even more attached to that, and they never deserve any of the bad things that ever happen to them, that they can suffer less because their parents are better educated despite whatever they may be going through. That's the big goal, and that's the why. And that's what keeps me going, because I am working my tail off on this social media platform, and it's a ton of work.
Yeah.
But if you have a strong
Yes,
enough
it is.
why, you can do it. And I'll give you the secondary why. I want control over my financial future. I want job security. I have been in this too long, and I have two little boys, and now they got to go to private school because the public schools are run over with too many kids for them to say, oh, mommy lost your job. Like, what are we going to do for your schooling? So there's really a big part of that too, where I just want to have control over the future of my career. And I hope to continue to practice in clinic, but also if I can teach other people and more people that I can see every day, and that will also allow me to have control over my career, great.
It's awesome what you're doing. Really is. I recommend everybody go check out Meg's socials. Where can they find you?
Yep. Should I see a doctor? And
Yeah, it's so good.
tongue in cheek, right? Because I'm not a doctor.
Yeah, right. But you can tell someone if they need to see a doctor. But yeah, no, I like it. I like it a lot. And is everything should I see a doctor, like on all platforms?
We got YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook is just my name, Meg
Hmm.
Conover.
Okay, cool.
But it'll be on there too. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm telling you, if you have kids or you're around children, like it's such a good resource to have, because there are things that you don't even think of, and you're like, oh my gosh, well now I'm so glad I know the answer to this because I'll be prepared or more prepared if this happens. And I'm kind of the same way where like I don't have such a strong agenda on social media other than let's tell people the truth, right? Like I'm all about like justice. And but within my realm, like within healthcare, within being a PA. But also I like to provide some like comedy relief. So I just really admire what you're doing, and I think you should continue. You're definitely growing, and I think it's going to blow up, honestly.
Thank you. Same back at you. I love what you're doing too. I think, gosh, I
Thanks.
wish I would have had something like this to refer to when I was looking at med school or PA school. I mean, there's so much we don't know. So I think these conversations are so important, and keep it up. I know it's a lot of work, so it's worth it.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been really fun. I love learning about people and what you guys do. And it's so interesting. And if I can just like spread that with the world, or one high school student who doesn't know if they want to, where they want to go to college, and it helps them make that decision, or, it helps somebody make the decision we made, which was being so close to applying to med school, because I was the same, and then switching to PA and being like super happy, then that, like, my job is done. Like, that's all I really
Yeah,
want to do.
I love it.
This is the So You Want to Work in Healthcare podcast with new episodes every month. Don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date on the latest releases.